SD-WAN and that connectivity is all about bringing together disparate organizations, but also on the IT side, applications, data sets, IP-enabled devices, the so-called Internet of Things, connecting all those things together and bringing them together in a consistent way to drive value from them. It's important to understand what is going to be effective and get the job done, and when face-to-face communications needs to be preserved and indeed promoted. There's a premium on effective communications. And for me, that's two things. It's saying the right things, and that might be long form, it might be short form that you're referring to, particularly at the start of a buyer journey, but at the right time.
Hello and welcome. I'm Mark Edwards. This is the Channel Zone. Thanks very much for joining me. Today we have a very special guest indeed. It's Andrew Vize. Andrew is the Chief Marketing Officer, the CMO of a managed services provider, Digital Space. And Digital Space are a leading provider in the kind of mid-market, or the mid-enterprise market, I should say. So good morning, Andrew.
Good morning, Mark.
Super. Well, look, thanks ever so much for joining us here today. We're at the beginning of 2024. A quick question. How's business?
Business is good. We've started the year with our biggest ever connectivity deal. And it's a really exciting deal that covers national coverage for SD-WAN. So we're getting on with that, which is really exciting. And business is looking good for the year.
Oh, fantastic. That's great to hear. Tell me, it's 2024, as I said. I dread to think about going back, taking my mind back to the beginnings of lockdown. But if you think about how things changed during that period, and we're now effectively and officially, I think, out of lockdown, I'm kind of interested in what are the changes that you've seen in your business and in your marketplace in that time, bringing us to where we are today. So what kind of changes in sales, marketing and technology?
Sales, marketing and technology. If I can perhaps start with a different lens and maybe societal, because I think whilst we might officially be out of lockdown on some measures, perhaps most importantly medically, I guess, post-pandemic, but there's a lasting impact across a number of aspects that you described, sales and technology, and also just how we work. Hybrid working still pervades. I know some organisations are back in the office. Other organisations have adopted hybrid working and accepted the fact that they're going to have some employees working from home, working from partners, working from other locations, and some in the office, and maybe a variable working pattern. We hear about midweek going into the office and maybe working from home on Fridays, and variations on those themes. So that's very much a trend that is pervading, and it's becoming endemic, I think. And so a lot of the technology solutions at the user, the employee end that Digital Space provide are addressing that challenge of disparate organizations and bringing them together. I mentioned our large SD-WAN deal at the start of our conversation. SD-WAN and that connectivity is all about bringing together disparate organizations, whether that's individual employees, whether that's customers, locations, sites, factories, shops. Petrol forecourts is something else that Digital Space have been working hard at connecting up. But also on the IT side, applications, data sets, IP-enabled devices, the so-called Internet of Things, connecting all those things together and bringing them together in a consistent way to drive value from them. And so I'd say that will be one of the major changes just in terms of consumption of IT, particularly at the end user.
That's a major change, though, isn't it? It's like, maybe, although it was a society-wide, it was a major issue for a couple of years. But what you're saying is the ways that we're working have changed now going forwards. We're on a different trajectory.
Yeah, that's evidenced by our conversation today. We're talking over a UC platform. Many organizations have adopted Teams, have adopted Zoom and the various other tools. And it's become a very standard way of working and bringing together, as I say, disparate organizations. And so whereas previously, AV used to be, if I go back, say, 5 years, I know that's ancient history.
AV being audio-visual there. I don't even think I hear that term so much anymore.
Exactly, but you used to go into the boardroom and you'd struggle to turn on the AV, and look for the laminated instructions, and then you'd have this, we're talking to this site or this office, the Edinburgh office or wherever. And it used to be an infrequent.
Trying to come up with a word where you're not swearing.
Yeah,
it's the one I'm thinking.
Experience that wasn't altogether satisfying. But now we've adopted these UC technologies, Teams or whatever. It's woven into the fabric of our everyday working lives. It's woven into the fabric of our desktop, the applications, and we present, we brainstorm, and many of the metaphors of face-to-face have been reproduced, not always as successfully as face-to-face, but in other ways are promoting productivity just across remote teams. And so we've adopted that now, and I think it's a positive thing. I think in many cases, if you use the right channel for the right interaction, you can improve workflow across an organization. But
I'm interested you used a word there. You said metaphor as a kind of, intrigued by your use of that, not hear that in the context of...
What I'm referring to is this UC-based conversation we are having is a substitute for face-to-face conversation.
It's a facsimile, isn't it? You're right on that, completely.
And the question is, and in particular in sales, and coming back to your earlier question, I'd say it's important to understand what is going to be effective and get the job done, and when face-to-face communications needs to be preserved and indeed promoted. And so particularly in our sales team, we know that for BAU, progress internally, we do a lot of Teams activity. And it's a very effective way of getting a disparate team working on a bid or a proposal or a sales activity together, and to keep work ticking along and to check on progress. But when it comes to customers and the different contacts we have across customers, because it's multi-layered, of course, I think the preference will be face-to-face, and that's what we preserve when we're selling.
Yeah. And what else has changed, though, in the way perhaps that people buy? As I said, we were, in many respects, forced into talk about digital transformation. I think many people's work lives were kind of all of a sudden oriented and centered onto what was coming to them online. How has that changed, let's say, on the sales? We can talk about the technology piece, but how has it changed selling, in addition to just customer meetings and using, as said, these kind of virtual platforms for that? Have you seen a change also in the way that people buy their technology and how they source and look for suppliers?
There's two sides to the answer to that question, I'd say, Mark, off the top of my head. There's marketing and sales. I think shall I start with sales? I'll answer your question. So sales for me is well past lockdown. We're back into face-to-face sales. And how that has changed over the last couple of years is, I think, now less to do with lockdown and more to do with the current economic environment. So the pressures around price of energy, the price of costs, the pressures around supply chain and technology components. And what that has meant, particularly the economic pressures that many organizations are feeling, it means that sales cycles are extending. There's more governance, and I think the sales sign-offs have become more senior. So whereas previously there were allocated budgets, maybe at an IT manager level or a similar buyer or decision maker, we're seeing more of those decisions go upward into a board or an executive for sign-off. So there's that elongation of the sales cycle. And I think what it's doing is putting a premium on a good sales technique, on a clear problem-solving approach, a win-win approach for for the sales organization and the customer. And as I say, to deliver that good technique, we have gone back to face-to-face selling.
You see, the most you can do in that situation, I think, is say try and the customer's preferred velocity of a deal. I think probably it does win out at the end of the day. So the most you can hope for is a salesperson that can pretty much align with what the customer wants, not forcing the issue, because I think trying to get customers to buy ahead of when it's necessary or needed within their organization, I think is a big problem. But if you can get the salespeople to, as I said, optimize the sales process, align with the customer, that might probably be the best way forward. Would you agree?
Yeah, and that transitions into the other part of my answer. So that alignment is very much how marketing has changed. So in terms of marketing, coming back to your question, post-lockdown, there was a lot of disruption. So I'll cite two channels. The whole outbound mailing and outbound calling in particular was severely disrupted. Many organizations lost their network and people were using private phones initially after lockdown. So telemarketing was severely disrupted and the efficacy just reduced altogether. And similarly with eventing. So exhibitions went online and the exhibitors were not used to delivering online exhibitions and conferences. And, there's a lot of problems with that initially. But I think that's very much subsided and eventing is back. I think what people have learned is putting on the right event, organizing it effectively and targeting it very carefully is really important to get the best from that event. So that sharpening of focus around eventing and face-to-face type activity is a good thing because it's expensive, because it's time consuming. You want to get the very best from it and likewise make it useful for the attendees and of best value. So I think that's how marketing's changed. But coming back to this elongation point you mentioned, with marketing, it's not just the sales cycle that's elongated, it's marketing too, to a certain extent. And particularly, I think organizations, when they're deciding they need to make a change that's driven by IT, are doing more research and more problem solving and supplier selection and qualification online.
Yes, all from their desk.
Absolutely. And then sales are brought in, and then there's that face-to-face intervention that we talked about previously. So from a marketing standpoint, introducing our organization digital space, helping organizations clarify and qualify why they need to change and how they might do that, and us surfacing our solutions and our approach at the appropriate time in the buying journey is absolutely key to us. And that puts a premium on our content marketing, white papers, thought leadership at the start of the funnel. And then as organizations start to align on a solution and look for potential suppliers, that moves into more of a trust building type transaction. So that's where we have to surface our references and our case studies and proof points to demonstrate capability, our accreditations, and differentiate from the other suppliers that they're considering. So there's a lot of focus on the website, a lot of focus on digital channels and content. And so that would be, I guess, the major change I'd cite in marketing, alongside the maybe for us, particularly with services too, as a managed services provider, what we're selling is not a neat transactional product. So we don't expect to transact as part of a marketing engagement, at the close of a marketing engagement. What we're doing is helping organizations qualify their problem, consider who are the right sort of suppliers for them, establish trust and credibility with our accreditations, and then move into a sales cycle.
Yeah, no, it makes an awful lot of sense. You mentioned, again, a little bit earlier, I think you said at the beginning of lockdown, you might have inferred, say, telecoms changed, but print, you say postal kind of services, but as I said, the marketing messaging now surely is predominantly online. Have you also noticed the need for it to be shorter and more condensed? In as much as kind of, I don't know whether it's sound bites, but kind of much snappier marketing. I recently did a kind of, 2-minute explainer videos, whereas previously, if I was to go back, let's say 10 years, I know that might seem an awful long time to many people, but a 20-minute stand-up presentation perhaps would have been the norm. Yeah. Now there's a demand for a 2-minute on-demand video that can be literally kind of delivered and sent worldwide, 24/7, 365 days.
Yeah, I have, and I would imagine that's less about a post-lockdown scenario and more about simply the volume that's resulted in online media and information. So social media and video channels are excellent for tech primers and sourcing of solutions and so forth. But the volume of it, particularly now when that can be AI generated, continues to increase. So I think what you're referring to is there's a premium on effective communications. And for me, that's two things. It's saying the right things. And that might be long form, it might be short form that you're referring to, particularly at the start of a buyer journey, but at the right time. So once you've articulated and positioned yourself in the buyer journey, then you earn the right for longer form content if it's appropriate. How you might deliver a solution, what is the approach of delivery. I mentioned a national rollout for SD-WAN that we talk about. How do we go about doing that? What's our approach? What is the value of our zero touch approach for enabling the SD-WAN nationally across thousands of locations, for example? And that might merit long form content, but it's got to be delivered at the right time when people have said, okay, I've alighted on your solution. I'm interested in what you're saying. Those 2-minute videos have done their job and now I want to know more. So, yes. Do you know what? It's just good practice communications it comes down to in order to cut through that noise, that volume. And that's the challenge I think a lot of marketeers face in the technology space.
Now, you mentioned AI. Where is AI going to change or affect your customers, maybe, or perhaps as an MSP? How are you guys going to leverage AI in all of its forms? How's it going to work?
I think the change will be quite profound, and it will happen with us integrating AI as part of our delivery mechanism and how we do business as a supplier, as a service provider. But it will also, and more importantly, affect how our customers operate. And our job as a service provider is to help them enable those outcomes of AI. I'll start with the former one. The former one is we've got ad hoc AI that helps us across any content creation in terms of getting some basic structure, some basic points. But it's what we're finding is very important to curate that, to personalize that. What we use it for is to quickly create mock-ups, to create base content, maybe content for search engine optimization that's keyword rich. But when it's going to be consumed by people, by pairs of eyes, it has to be really finely crafted, because I think people, and you may have experienced this, Mark, when you're looking at social media, content that's bland, that's been produced by AI, you can still spot it. I dare say that might change in future, but you can spot it, whether it's visual AI with bots or whether it's content, and it's unappealing. And we come back to your point 5 minutes ago. I mentioned good content surfaced at the right time. And that means curated, carefully drafted content, because differentiation is crucial for all of us, and digital space in particular, in order to help our customers pick the right supplier. They want to pick somebody who's going to deliver what they need to best effect. And that's all about being clear and providing good information that organizations can then use to qualify. That's the marketing approach, and I can look at that again if you're interested in it. Where we're helping our customers deliver AI is more profound, because in terms of information technology, there's two words there: information and technology. And I guess historically, many service providers have maybe focused on the technology side, on the infrastructures, on the platforms, on cloud, on hybrid, on connectivity, which is super important. But that is only a conduit to deliver the value of information. And I think we've mentioned lockdown being a social change, a pivot point. I think the rise of ChatGPT has done that too, in that it's given everyone an immediate glimpse of the power of information, particularly large volumes of information, large language models. Now, that's great for ad hoc queries, for generating content that I mentioned.
Yeah.
But the solution our customers are looking to adopt is to get value from their data from previously disparate data sources. It might be their CRM system, their knowledge of their customers. It might be their operations, and you can see there's a synergy there. How do we align operations to best suit our customers? It might be the customer services systems. So that's their UC, their customer interface, their contact centers. The contact centers that Digital Space provide at the moment are AI enabled and measure sentiment of every call, just as an example. So it's
sentiment there for the listeners and the viewers there. Andrew, I did some work. Maybe again, I'm going a decade back in the US with a company that used to provide the telephone systems for traders. You know what I mean? The desk traders at Goldman Sachs and buy, sell. But they talked, and I would say this is at least 10 years ago, they did talk about sentiment then. That was the first time it came into my kind of consciousness, where they were effectively hoping that they would be able to assess the sentiment of oil or gold based on trader telephone conversations. I don't think it ever happened at the time, but that was the first time I'd heard it. But are you saying that is now, it's there in the contact center, is it?
It's there, it's established, it's done in real time. Every call, sentiment of both the agent who's delivering or receiving the call
measured,
and the customer. And what that enables organizations to do is the call center supervisor can look at in real time who's sticking to the script, if there's a script, how customers are responding, and if people are veering off script, they're able to intervene, listen to the call, and help the agent get back on track and deliver a satisfying response. And that's very well established. I think your example of the sort of stock exchange is a very early use case, but that is a great example of AI taking previously disparate data sets, so value of commodities, how people are talking in over a telephony environment as it would have been then, and bringing the two together and establishing that relationship, and then being able to make decisions on that relationship,
which potentially would be of enormous value in that arena.
So that if you take that as a use case, that is one use case for the power of data and establishing the value of data. And so that is the more profound delivery of AI that we're supporting customers with, particularly helping them with a data-led architecture, which is making accessible those previously disparate data sets they possess today can be exploited.
Because a challenge, though, with regards to AI, from a previous conversation I've had, is that not only might today's enterprises, with the best intentions, be using AI, but there's also a criminal underworld out there, and I'm thinking specifically here in terms of cyber and security, but they are also, I believe, taking on board and utilizing AI to extraordinary effect.
Yes, absolutely. So you can imagine AI-powered cyber attacks, and it is quite frightening. But then the counterpoint is there's AI-enabled cybersecurity. Yes. So a lot of that...
Is that something that Digital Space do?
It is, yeah. Our secure connected cloud fabric is underpinned by security, just like that. That has that enablement of pattern matching, and these are part of the solutions that we bring together. And the solutions I was mentioning, just as AI can create cyber threats, similarly cybersecurity can use AI to counter those. So it is a bit of an arms race. And with any new technology, there is a threat there. I think on balance, very much AI is a positive force. There are absolutely negative aspects to it. And I think the press have picked up on it because the press have followed the rise in AI through ChatGPT, and they're a bit hyperbolic, really, in their response to
That's media for you.
yeah, absolutely. And that's what happens when something bubbles up into a popular consciousness. But I think the benefits outweigh the negatives, but you have to be cognizant of those. I think if I take a more commonplace example of maybe just some of the challenges of adopting AI, I mentioned this disparate data sets and the power of bringing them together. It really brings into sharp focus in an organization their access policies, access management for the different data sets. And I think that's one of the things that organizations have to get put in good order in order to adopt AI in a constructive and safe manner. But having said that, we don't want to be a gatekeeper. We're an enabler. And on balance, I think AI will be.
Well, it should be able to. I'm amazed that it can offer such kind of insight, even into those, say, telephone-based human interactions. But if it can help companies optimize that conversation, that dialogue between customer and service agent or whatever, then it's clear that AI can probably help organizations optimize in many fronts, whether it's logistics, distribution, communications, all sorts.
It has been doing, particularly in logistics and distribution. That has been part of those specific line of business applications for many years. And whilst it wouldn't have been called AI and it wouldn't have been a learning algorithm until relatively recently, that's been underpinned by logic and mathematics for years. But what we're starting to see is learning algorithms and automating algorithms. And yet you talk about how it's fascinating. If you think about sales is a language-based interaction between people. And just in terms of absorbing successful sales, a large language model can look at those patterns and you help train people in those patterns. That's very much part of what you do. And I'm not for a moment suggesting you're going to be replaced, Mark. I wouldn't be worried about that.
And can I say, Andrew, it's the first time I've ever heard sales referred to as a language-based interaction. I mean, you're totally right, but I said, but yeah, it's a particular way of looking at it. Listen, I wonder, I don't want to get all conspiracy theorist here, or maybe I do, but you think of that 2 years. Was it 2 years of lockdown? 2 years of lockdown, 2 years of Zoom and Teams calls. You know, you think about how the millions of customer conversations or business conversations, internal, everything, over those platforms. Dear, AI could really have learned an awful lot about how the world works in terms of those language-based interactions, which aren't only selling, but are, as I say, internal communications as well. It is. So for a 2-year period, all of that effectively did go through technology, whereas previous to that, it might have been two people standing in a room talking to one another. That conversation and what was said went no further.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are rules on data retention and what's legally submissible in terms of records that organizations have to keep. And that comes back to the policies and access management and data retention policies and basic GDPR, quite frankly, and legalities of contractual communications. And that's what I mentioned and was alluding to in terms of having clarity and bringing those policies up to date as just as one of the pillars on which successful AI sits, as well as having just access to the different data sets that I mentioned. But these new technologies always bring benefits, but also shine a light on other areas that maybe have not kept up for whatever reason in organizations. And that's part of successful adoption. And so this is what we're learning as we move into this phase of the full information or AI information age.
Exciting times ahead.
Very exciting, very exciting. But I mentioned, our big deal kicking off the year. That's all about connecting up physicality of a distributed organization, people, sites, locations, retail outlets, and then the information that's being created and flowing across all those different nodes, customer interactions, back to applications, core systems, front office, CRMs, and then back to the back office, finance, and the operations system. And so it's all about putting in the IT to enable AI and data-led infrastructures. So really
Andrew, I say that fantastic. As a great conversation, a super chat. Can I just say, it's I've got 3 words here that is I would rarely hear in conversation with anybody in the world of work, but used the metaphor. Very rarely come across that word in a business context. Profound is another word, which we are living in, actually, as I say, in an extraordinary moment in time. And there is a lot of profundity in there, but I love the fact that comes out during our language-based interaction, shall we say, those, say, powerful words. I really appreciate the time and having given some time to actually provide some of this insight. I really value it and really appreciate it. I'm sure our listeners and viewers will have appreciated it too. So thank you ever so much for joining us here today, ladies and gentlemen. Andrew Vize, Chief Marketing Officer of Digital Space. Thank you.
Pleasure.